We're here with my friend Fernando Garcia today, and I've been looking forward to this podcast because we've known each other for well over a decade, and I've had many conversations involving some of the questions and the topics from today. But now we just get to do it a bit more formally for the purpose of the podcast. Fernando, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it as well.
And a lot of these items will be, you'll say, Gary, we've talked about this before, but now it's for our audience to hear some of it. So it's truly intended to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Fernando, just on some of just at a very high level, because people see you writing for legal magazines and at events, etc. But tell us a bit about Fernando as the person, sort of where you grew up, sort of your personal story a little bit more, and then how you ended up in law.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So born in Argentina, grew up in Uruguay, and came to Canada many years ago. Typical immigrant story, working hard, working with my parents, making sure that, we understood the value of hard work and the importance of constantly persevering and trying to do more with less, the typical stories that we all hear. But really, truly, the inspiration for me in terms of becoming a lawyer was not something I planned. It was not sort of a straight line path. It was more lots of twists and turns along the way that began by trying to pursue things that were interesting to me. And I've always had a bit of a passion about, or with politics, business, law, and just HR generally. So I always pursued that. Initially, going to law school was not something I necessarily planned for. It was something that evolved. I initially had a career path in labor relations and HR. Completed a master's of labor relations, and that's where I thought I was going to go. But I had a really good work opportunity at Ontario Power Generation in the labor relations department, where I got to deal with some really cool stuff. I was involved in negotiations. I was involved in some of the labor relations stuff, and I got to work with really good people and people that, external counsels and even in-house counsels from there who motivated me and really started getting me thinking about, maybe law is not such a bad thing because it gives me an opportunity to sort of mix in the HR, labor relations, and the legal piece, and even business to some extent. And that's one of the key differentiators when you're working in-house versus in a law firm, is that you're more involved in the business on a day-to-day basis, more strategy, and fell in love with that. And so really tried to develop a career that focused on those three elements. And ultimately ended up doing an MBA as well to try to provide that additional support for the business side. And I've been lucky enough to have roles in really good companies that allow me to tap on and to enhance my experience and background in those three pieces of that are of very strong interest for me. So it's never been necessarily planned. It's not something that I could have foreseen in terms of where I am or how I got here, but it's definitely something that I've enjoyed the ride and have been working on continuous improving and trying to always do what I can do to get to that next stage in my career.
When a lot of our careers are a bit of sort of stumbling upon opportunities as we go and then learn along the way. And even on this podcast, we've had lawyers essentially talking about, hey, I happen to be in this practice area because there was this partner I liked, I got an opportunity, and then next thing you know, I end up in this area, and here I am today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like I always say to people, you have to remain flexible, and you have to be able to answer the door when opportunity knocks. And you never know what the opportunity is. When I first ended my articling program and I got called to the bar, I was not necessarily sure where I wanted to proceed next. And an opportunity became available at one of the companies, Navistar, where their labor relations manager had taken sick and they needed somebody to come in and do a 6-month stint. At that point in time, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I want to do, work at a law firm. I don't know what I want to do, and I don't know how I want to mix that legal with the labor relations. So I took that 6-month labor relations manager stint, and it really opened up the doors. It gave me lots of practical experience. And then several years later, when they were looking for general counsel, it was the perfect move. I already knew the contracts. I already knew the people. I already knew the unions. I knew the the company, I knew the issues. So it gave me an opportunity to jump into that role where, 2.5 years after getting called to the bar, you're now the general counsel of this company that, it had a strong reputation in Canada and across the world in building cool trucks and some amazing industries that I was involved in. So again, would I have foreseen that? Impossible. I could lie and tell you that it was a strategic plan, but the reality is you just kind of take it as you go, and you build and learn from all the experiences.
Well, and so would your advice be to sort of younger lawyers as they're going through their early learnings in their career, pursue opportunities or tackle them and say yes to them as they come? Is that something that, like, how do young lawyers sort of figure out how to approach what should be of most interest or what they should consider?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, right? I think you need to be able to identify things that you're interested in. And also be able to identify your strengths and weaknesses. Like, for example, I knew that just my own personal characteristics and my own comfort style, I would never do litigation. So litigation was not something I contemplated, or at any point did it cross my mind. Certain areas of the law I would not do well in, and I knew that. I was very clear with myself in terms of what the parameter of what I think I would do well in and what I wouldn't do well in. Again, you kind of you have a path, but you have flexibility within the path. I think it's important to understand your strengths and weaknesses as well.
Very much so. Very much so. And Fernando, I'm going to take a step back to sort of you growing up, etc. Who do you think had the biggest impact on you growing up?
I would definitely say family. Family was quite important. I mean, I when I looked at sort of their struggles, when I looked at their hard work, when I looked at their dedications, when I looked at just how they sacrificed everything for us and for us to have a future, it made it easier to then put in that effort to try to achieve whatever goals or objectives you set for yourself. And at the same time, it took away the excuse of saying, well, something's too hard, or I can't do that, or I can't do this. Because when I've seen what they've been able to accomplish, it was hard for me to say, well, I can't do the same, or I can't put in the same effort or the elbow grease needed to get to where I want to get to. So that's important. But I mean, many factors, right? I'm a big believer that many things influence you along the way. The people that took time out to mentor me, the people that took time out to try to help me improve, the people who had confidence in you when maybe others didn't. All those factors, I think, come and play a role in terms of your own confidence and your own belief in what you can do and what you can accomplish.
So certainly with family, obviously they would have been there along the way, and I can appreciate how that's a motivator for you to work hard and sort of make sure you achieve some of your goals, because they certainly sacrificed a lot coming to Canada and as the typical sacrifices that a lot of immigrants go through. Now, in terms of the mentors you talked about, how did you solicit some help? Like, how did you develop some of these mentorships? Did this happen sort of organically, or were there some people that you approached them and said, "Hey, I'd love for you to be my mentor"? And I'm really sort of want to use this as a bit of guidance for some of the more junior lawyers or aspiring lawyers listening to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to find that lawyers, in particular in Canada, are very open. They're busy, but they're very open to trying to help people out, to give people their opinions, and to give people a little bit of feedback, in terms of what they need to do with regard to their careers or what they're trying to achieve. Early on, law firms, especially if you're doing the articling process, they usually appoint a mentor. So I had really strong mentors where I articled. I mean, and that was really, really important and good for me. Being dragged on to certain files or certain experiences really, really help. That advice about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. That really helps to sort of guide your own style and to learn. But then there's also sort of the informal mentors along the way, the people you get to know through networks. Like LinkedIn, for example. Just reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, listen, I saw what you were doing. That's great. Would love to, pick your brain for 5 minutes on something." I tend to find people are very open to that. Sometimes, unfortunately, you fall into their email jail where they have 200 other things and they say, I would love to help you. And then they completely forget about it. So you have to learn not to take it personally. You have to understand that nobody's out there to try to be mean to you or to ignore you. People just get busy, unfortunately, and things fall through the cracks. And I know I've done that a million times, unfortunately. But yeah, whenever you do have that moment and somebody reaches out at the right time, you're more than happy to help out, more than happy to give your opinion. Because at the end of the day, we've all been there. We've all known how important that is, and we all know how that that guidance or even those suggestions and recommendations really can have a strong impact on you, your career, and everything that goes around that.
So the lesson is to anybody seeking mentorship is reach out, don't be shy, and
Yeah.
knowing that a lot of the people you're reaching out to can be quite busy and they have their own sort of challenges from time to time. That if they don't respond, or if they respond but then they don't follow through, don't take it personally, because it's just you keep doing it because it really is the best way to seek mentorship.
Yeah, it's perseverance, right? I've seen it in the last 6 months when I made a career change or a change in employer, and it's been difficult. I've been trying to learn a new role. I've been trying to learn, develop relationships with new people and lots of new files. And people reach out, and I really want to help them out, and then I just completely forget. But there are some who just continue to, send you that email. Hey, are we getting together this week? I get it, no problem. Next week, week after that. So they do get, that perseverance does pay off, and I think it's not a lack of want. It's a lack of just being able to set the time aside and really help people out. And we go through lots of ebbs and flows, and so when you have some time, you would be more than happy to help out. And I think I value more the unstructured, sort of informal, hi, how are you doing? I have a question, than the sort of the formal, mentorship type approach where, okay, tomorrow, write down 4 goals that you have and let's discuss how I like to have a little bit more free flowing, a little bit more informal. That worked for me better always, and I tend to think that that's probably how I work best as well. So again, different strokes for different folks, but I mean, in terms of, for me, that's sort of more my style, my approach.
So we've talked a bit about sort of this in your career, and I joke sometimes when I introduce you to people that you went from automotive parts to cars to jets, and now you went to the base materials, producing the steel. So take us a bit through your career journey and some of sort of the pivotal moments that led to your sort of where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, first things first, I was one of those people who didn't necessarily know what they wanted to do. I didn't have, I wasn't a child to say, hey, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be. I kind of let it all go and evolve as I went through. High school was not a great time for me. I struggled through high school. I didn't do very well in high school. I took high school more as an opportunity to socialize and get to know people and, play sports and do all those fun things than actual learn. So when it came time to think about, okay, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to get serious about this, what am I going to do? I found a program that was perfect, which was called labor studies at McMaster University. And it was great because it sort of brought in a bit of the politics, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of the business, a little bit of all those factors. And I say always, it's kind of like you put it in a blender and you mix it together, and what you get is the result. So it was a great program. It gave you so many different perspectives. And that was part of that push towards getting an interest. And I think that's critical, because if you do something you're interested in, something you love to do, then coming to work or pursuing your career is not something that's like a task. It's something you love to do, and you want to get involved, and you want to learn more, and you want to continue to improve. So I found that. I found that with labor studies. I found that with labor relations. And so it was definitely a niche area of the law, something that I really developed and I really appreciated and felt interested in. And then everything has sort of evolved from there. In terms of industries, I mean, I was very fortunate to be in automotive, then airplanes, like you said, and now base materials. I mean, I think those are really cool and sexy industries. But it was never necessarily the plan. I tend to find I'm very agnostic with regard to sectors or industries. I tend to find that, contracts are contracts are contracts. Some of the stuff that you deal with, the being able to manage your clients, being able to work with, the business teams, being involved in learning the business, and those are all fundamental elements, regardless of whether you're selling widgets, services, or spaceships. It's same concept, right? The fundamentals are there. It's more about the way you approach it, the way that you develop the relationships, and the way that you try to grow professionally.
And from a historically speaking, one of the when you think of sort of your career over time, have you found shifts in the law have affected a bit your career path, or it was just more opportunities as they arose? And what I mean by that is sometimes uh, the that you came from a labor background where you understood that. Like, did that guide that more because certain labor issues arose more, and the people look for GCs with that background, or was it more we're looking for Fernando as a profile than specifically the area of the law?
Yeah, I think both. So when I first started at, for example, Navistar, labor relations was a big part of what they needed from that role. So coming in and having a strong labor law, employment law background was critical. What I was doing at that time entailed 45% of the work was labor and employment law. So it allowed me to get my foot in the door and then slowly build up and learn on the other areas, and maybe I wasn't as strong with. And by the time I left 5 years later, labor and employment was probably 10% or 5% of what I was doing, and everything else had grown in size. Franchise law became more and more important. Then when I took on the role at Nissan, franchise law was critical. And it was something that then allowed me to be a contender for that role, which otherwise I wouldn't have been. So I tended to focus on that. And then once I was there, the franchise law helped me develop other areas and more corporate commercial piece, which then helped me pursue my next role in terms of cargo jet. But also the key element was growth. At Nissan, the focus was growth, working with your teams to try to develop market share and develop, teams and growing that. And that became a very strong selling point as well. So working, in entrepreneurial type companies that are going through growth stages, that became as much of the selling point as, a particular type of or substantive area of the law. So I think it evolves. There are some times where your strength in a particular subject matter will be useful, but sometimes your experience as, working at an entrepreneurial company might be useful, or working at a high-tech company might be useful, or working in a particular area or subsect of an industry could be useful. I mean, for a while, cannabis, right? Remember when cannabis law was a huge thing because it was a brand new area of the law that was opening up. Nobody had experience. You could call yourself a subject matter expert, and you probably wouldn't be off because there wasn't anybody who was a subject matter expert. So interest was 90% of the requirement there. So it's about finding that niche. It's about finding that thing that allows you to be more marketable and that allows you to take on a particular role and add value right away. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important part.
But it's a perfect example for now, because I remember at the time, and you and I would have seen many of our friends that went through this. A lot of mining lawyers. It was a time where mining was a little bit on shaking ground, rebranded themselves as cannabis lawyers, and it's a bit like what you said as well, that contracts are contracts. Then it's regardless. Then you think of them in the new context, and that rebranding is really about focusing and marketing yourself as well as and your skill sets.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's so many great conferences out there. There's so many amazing seminars and webinars and things out there that you can become part of and really pick up the knowledge of a particular industry or a particular area of the law. And, the more you get immersed about it, the more you can write articles about it, the more you can get involved in the issues. It's not hard to build yourself into something that maybe you didn't see yourself as prior to that. But again, I think you also have to be knowledgeable of your strengths and your weaknesses. Again, I could go to all the conferences I want for litigation, but I don't think I'll be the litigation guy. Just knowing my own limitations, right? But then conversely, you go from transportation to cannabis, heavily regulated areas where there's a lot of government interaction. So those are things that are, that transcend the industry or that really help you take advantage of your skill sets.
Now, you are involved in a variety of organizations and associations that you had over the time, and you have 4 kids, passion for motorcycles, and I'm
Yes,
giving some of this away, but certainly would love to hear more about it. And how do you balance it all? Because it's sort of all the various roles you've had are demanding with time and have been demanding with time. How do you balance that? How do you find that balance in life?
Yeah, it's not easy, right? It's one of those things where it definitely is not easy, and if I told you so, I would be lying to you. But it's making time and understanding the things that motivate you and get you going. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a long drive into work, but I mix that in with my love of motorcycles. I take the motorcycle in and home as much as I can, and it helps you sort of get your mind space in the right order. It helps you do something that you love, and it helps you take away something that you might see as a negative and make it into a positive. But really, it's finding what drives you, and during certain periods of time, it might be more business focused. Other times, it might be more family focused. But really finding that piece and making it work for you. But I always say to people, you got to be mindful that career and law in particular, it's a marathon. It's not a 100-meter sprint. So you have to make sure that you don't burn out, that you give yourself the proper breaks, that you give yourself that you do things that you love as well, because that's what's really going to be helping you succeed, and to do so for long term rather than short term. Because when you look at sort of mental health issues in terms of our profession, we don't do well, and there's a lot of issues and lots of people that need support and help. And part of that is making sure that you understand your limitations, that you understand what you can do and what drives you, and the things that make you happy. And there's nothing wrong about dealing with the issues that don't.
For sure, for sure. Well, and I think normalizing some of that, Fernando, and knowing that there's times where it's challenging, can be overwhelming, and sort of being
Oh,
supportive of one another in the legal community, I think it's particularly important. There's all kinds of professions that have challenges, but legal
yes.
tends to be one of the ones that is heavy on that front. uh,
Yeah.
especially driven by area of practice, and uh, it's by definition you're dealing with preventing problems, but then you're also dealing with problems once they happen. So,
Yes.
uh,
Absolutely. And the associations have done a great job. The Law Society has done a good job about setting up programs to help out people when they need help, and taking away the stigma from saying, "Hey, listen, maybe I'm not feeling perfect, and I'm not well today. I need somebody to talk to, or I need somebody to help." And so I think that's really important when you take away the stigma and you just say, "Look, you have resources available. Let's make sure people get the help they need." And that's
So, Fernando, being a general counsel, you are also an executive in many of the organizations that you've been in, where you're sometimes going beyond the law as well, like where you're giving business advice, or legal is built in, but it's not just about knowing the law. So, what are some tips for general counsel to be effective in-house, to be effective to their respective management teams, etc.? What are some of your learnings over the years that you'd say, hey, here's some of what I think will serve me well when I manage it in such and such a way.
Yeah, I think it's almost trite to say because you hear it everywhere, but don't become the department of no. Work with teams to develop solutions that work. Because at the end of the day, they have objectives that they need to meet too, and they don't want to come to the legal department and always hear no, 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 no. A better approach is like, well, there's certain challenges and limitations to that. Let's see how we can get beyond those. Let's see how we can, risk in everything that we do. There is risk in everything we do. You're flying airplanes or you're driving cars. There's always a risk. You have to mitigate the risk. You have to try to work together to try to reduce the risk and increase the likelihood of success. That is important. Staying curious and staying, uh, interested in terms of learning the industry, learning the players, understanding the challenges in the industry, the geopolitical things that are affecting your industry and your company. I think those are all important to be successful. And there are things that maybe go beyond the law in particular in some ways, but are so important in terms of the work that we do. Being able to work with people, to be a helping hand, to teach them that, especially as in-house counsel, whenever they call you, the clock is not running. So get me involved early. It's much easier to deal with issues up front and to constantly be fighting fires at the end of the day. It's critical that they see you as a business partner and somebody who's there and is not there to throw them under the bus or to just tell them about everything they're doing wrong, but to work on solutions and make sure that you're working together from the beginning and reaching the objectives. Their objectives become your objectives. Their success becomes your success.
And what should General Counsel do? Like, should they engage with some of their executives, say with their CEO, et cetera, and say, hey, what are some of the things that you expect out of my role that perhaps I'm not doing? Like, what are some of the best ways, if they're unsure about doing this, are some of the best ways to try to uncover this?
Yeah, I think like anything else, communication is critical. Being able to be approachable for people to understand that you have that shared objectives, that you're working with them, that you're a team member, that you're not just that corner office there that is not going to be sort of interested in getting involved on issues, or that you're only there to solve problems. You want to be part of the team, and I think that's a critical part of it: communication and teamwork, and just building those relationships. In everything that we do, as you know very well, Gary, relationships and networks and just the communication is everything. And being able to have that strong network inside your company, externally, within the legal profession or anywhere else is so important in getting our work done beyond just the legal work that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Very, very much so. Very much so. And Fernando, if money was no object, if you had won $100 million lottery, what would Fernando be doing with his free time?
Oh, that's a tough question. Because there's always sort of that part where you want to do certain things that fulfill your interest, but at the same time, I mean, I couldn't even contemplate having that much money and not helping out other people around me as well and trying to get involved. I mean, obviously, if you didn't have to work, things like volunteering is incredibly important. Being able to support others, doing some amazing work like you do, for example, at Junior Achievement, for example, helping shape and support other people who have ideas and want to have certain paths that they want to follow in life. It's impossible and obscene to think about that much money, but really the opportunities are endless as long as you think beyond just yourself, but just the incredible change that would mean in what you can do for others and how you can help out, lift everyone around you up, and make a positive impact on your community.
Well, and I think the giving back is, no one has ever gone wrong by giving back. It's always fulfilling in many ways.
Absolutely. And you were talking earlier about junior lawyers. Something that you should always look at is joining boards, getting involved in some of the incredible organizations that are out there that need maybe your particular background, your particular mindset, your experiences that you can bring to the table. There's countless ways of you to get involved. It's just so important to be able to say, look, beyond just what I do on a day-to-day basis, this is how I can help, and I can make an impact on the community around me and everyone around me as well in this profession and lawyers.
Extremely important. Fernando, I have one last question for you before we go to the portion of our podcast that I call rapid fire questions. And I have many more, but always conscientious of time, as my team keeps me in check to say that, hey, we need to make sure that we keep the podcast concise. So the law is changing consistently, and so are the demands on companies where in-house counsel and how they approach the advice will also evolve. So some of the advice that you're providing to your management teams 10 years ago may be very different than what it looks like now. So what's the best way to stay on top of this evolution? Like, how do lawyers make sure they're on top of all of it sufficiently, and then make sure that the advice is relevant enough to date at the same pace?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and I think a lot of it also depends on the size of the legal department that you're in. If you're in a smaller legal department, you basically become the Jack or Jill of all trades, and so you have to get involved in a lot more things. And at that point, then your role is less to be the subject matter expert on every single thing that can possibly cross your desk, but really to be able to understand and point out the red flags, the things that maybe need a little bit additional support or looking into. Then be able to almost be like a quarterback and look at who can properly advise you in those issues and who can do some of that work for you at the best possible rates and based on the subject matter, the risk, and all those elements to consider. And I think though, regardless of the size of your industry or your legal department, the key is get involved in. There's just some amazing conferences and seminars and webinars and things like that are available by law firms and associations that we're all part of, which are really important. And they're really important because they help you network, which is important in itself, but also the subject matter and the material that you pick up and you learn. It's funny because you never go to a conference or a seminar and come out saying, "Oh, now I get it." But it gives you ideas about other things you need to be looking at, issues that are arising, and it really helps you at the very least, identify the issues and then be able to look for information when you need it. But there's just, like you said, so much information going on, so much change happening around us, not only in the substantive matter, but how we do our work. AI, you look at AI, you look at technology, where you can't just turn a blind eye to it, because at the end of the day, it helps you be more effective, more efficient, and be able to do your job better. So if you completely disregard that, then you quickly become outdated or unable to provide the service that you need to for your clients, regardless of who the clients are.
When I think it's, to your point, is that consistent effort to consistently be informed and learning from the people around you, like a good ecosystem and the various events, because it is the ongoing. I'm not sure that there is a way around the ongoing learning. We have a lot more resources online than we ever did, but that's not enough in itself. So.
Absolutely, but the key is to stay curious, and the key is to always want to develop yourself and continuously learn. Like, learning does not stop once you finish university or your articling program. It is something that is lifelong, and you need to see that as an incredible opportunity and something that's great, not something that's like, oh God, I got a course. Like, it's fun, it's exciting to learn, and that's how you make yourself stronger. Because at the end of the day, you have a brand, you have and you have assets that you're providing to others, and that you can't do provide a proper service if you don't have that skill set and the knowledge of what's going on around you.
Very much so. I couldn't agree more. And Fernando, we're going to move to the part of the podcast. The rapid fire questions is supposed to be a fun, interactive, sort of first word that comes to mind type thing. So no need to overthink it. And the first question is, what is your favorite word or phrase?
Favorite word or phrase? I would say it comes from an Aerosmith song, and it's "Life's a journey and not a destination." And I think that's so important, that oftentimes, we set goals and we try to get from point A to point B, and we forget to enjoy the path that takes us there, as crazy as it gets at times, and to stop and smell the flowers along the way. And I think that's very, very important.
It really is. Now, what word or phrase do you hate?
Hate? I would probably have to say, we've always done it that way, or no. Those are the killer words when you're in house counsel, because there's always a better way to do something. Even if you have it pretty locked down, there's always a better way, and you have to always have an open mind about how you can improve on what you do.
What word do you have a hard time pronouncing, if any?
Well, my kids always make fun of me when I see the word pizza. Let's go get some pizza. So I would have to say that word. For some reason, I just can never pronounce it properly. And it's one of those things where, you've lived in Canada for many, 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 many years, and sometimes your accent never goes away. And you get to learn to be very proud of your accent, because it shows that you know a different language, that you have a background, and you bring something else to the table. So I tend to be proud of the way I mispronounce pizza.
What is your favorite word or phrase in another language?
I would have to say that the words that were written in my my law school at the entrance, every time you walked in, "Audi alterum partem," and it's basically always hear the other side, or be open to hearing the other side of an argument or a discussion, because it's so important. Because only by listening can we really overcome some of the differences that we can have, and we can develop relationships.
And do we need that more than ever these days? So very, very true.
Absolutely.
How many languages do you speak?
Well, right now, Spanish and English, and Portuguese is definitely something I want to pick up. My spouse is Portuguese, so that's an incentive right there. But I also do a lot of work with colleagues in Brazil, and it's something I've always wanted to develop. So it's not easy. You have to practice it. It takes a lot of effort. It helps when you listen to the music and the sports, but that's something that I definitely want to improve on as my next goal to pick up some Portuguese.
And what's one word to describe yourself by?
Probably perseverance. Never been the fastest, never been the strongest, but I do try to pride myself in working hard and just getting to whatever goals and objectives you set for yourself.
Well, in one of the studies on success, that was one of the factors that was the most consistent: perseverance, showing up every day, regardless of any other skills people had. It was all about perseverance.
Absolutely, and being able to roll up the sleeves and get the work done, right?
Very much so, very much so. Fernando, I appreciate you joining me on Syllables today and really making the time. For any of our listeners, you can follow us to listen to other podcasts we have coming up. And on the Alexa Translations website, you can also see a webinar that Fernando recently did with a few other friends out of Latin America about how AI is revolutionizing the legal sector in Latin America. Really interesting webinar. It was done all in Spanish as well. So that's that was a testament to one of my earlier questions to him about how many languages he speaks. But Fernando, I appreciate the time. Thank you for joining me today.
No, thank you very much to you, Gary, and to all the listeners. And again, I appreciate it and keep up the excellent work. I mean, it's great to have these conversations and these discussions, and really appreciate them.